Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Naruto was Harishma Senju reincarnation. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The night air of October the 10th was always crisp, carrying the scent of roasted chestnuts, sweet teriyaki glaze, and the metallic tang of chilled autumn winds. For the villagers of Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves, this night was a grand tapestry of celebration and solemn remembrance. Paper lanterns, painted with vibrant reds and oranges, were strung between rooftops, casting a warm, flickering glow over the cobblestone streets. It was the night the village celebrated its survival. 7 years ago, the nine-tailed demon fox had descended upon them, a localized apocalypse of fur, fangs, and catastrophic chakra. Thousands had died, buildings had been reduced to ash, and the beloved fourth Hokage had sacrificed his life to slay the beast. At least that was the story the civilians told themselves over cups of warm sake. They danced, they laughed, and they drank to forget the terror of that night. But for a 7-year-old boy named Naruto Uzumaki, October the 10th was not a day of celebration. It was a day to survive. Naruto moved like a ghost through the shadowy peripheries of the festival. He wore an oversized, faded white t-shirt adorned with a rusted red spiral on the back, and a pair of blue shorts that had seen better days. He kept his head down, his shockingly bright blonde hair hidden as best as he could beneath the collar of his shirt. His small hands were buried deep in his pockets, his fingers curled into tight fists to stop them from trembling. His stomach gave a violent, hollow rumble. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The orphanage matron had locked him out again, claiming he had missed curfew, though Naruto knew for a fact he had arrived 10 minutes early. It was a game they played, a game where Naruto always lost, and his prize was a night shivering in the cold. Just get to the forest, Naruto told himself, his bright cerulean eyes darting nervously toward the lighted stalls. If I can just get past the market district, I can find some berries or maybe catch a fish in the training grounds. The sights and smells of the festival were agonizing. To his left, a vendor was flipping thick cuts of pork on a searing iron grill, the fat hissing and popping, sending clouds of mouth-watering smoke into the air. Naruto swallowed the thick saliva pooling in his mouth. He took a hesitant step toward the stall, drawn by a hunger so deep it physically ached behind his ribs. He had a few ryo tucked in his shoe. Maybe, just maybe, because it was a holiday, the vendor would be kind. "Excuse me, mister?" Naruto's voice was small, raspy from disuse. "Can I?" The vendor, a burly man with a thick black beard, turned around with a jovial smile that instantly melted into a sneer the moment his eyes landed on Naruto's whisker-marked cheeks. "Get out of here," the man hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper so as not to disturb the paying customers nearby. He picked up a long set of metal tongs and pointed them at the boy. "We don't serve your kind. Go rat around in the garbage where you belong." Naruto flinched, taking a rapid step back. "I have money! I just want one. I said get lost, demon!" the vendor shouted, losing his temper. He grabbed a handful of raw, discarded pork fat from a bucket and threw it. The wet, greasy mass slapped against Naruto's chest, staining his shirt. Several villagers turned at the commotion. The festive chatter died down, replaced by a cold, suffocating silence. Eyes, dozens of them, locked onto the small boy. Naruto knew those eyes. He had seen them every day of his life. They weren't looking at a 7-year-old child. They were looking at a monster. They were looking at the very thing that had torn their families apart 7 years ago. "It's him," a woman whispered to her husband, pulling her own child behind her skirt. "Why is he out tonight of all nights?" A shinobi, out of uniform and reeking of cheap alcohol, slurred loudly. He stepped out from the crowd, his face flushed red with grief and rage. "Does he think it's funny, walking around on the anniversary of what he did?" "I didn't do anything!" Naruto cried out, his voice cracking. He wiped the grease from his shirt, his chest tightening with panic. "I was just walking. My brother died because of you." The drunk shinobi bellowed, taking a staggering step toward Naruto. He reached down and picked up an empty sake bottle by the neck. "You shouldn't even be alive!" Survival instinct, honed by years of neglect and abuse, screamed at Naruto to move. He didn't wait for the man to swing the bottle. He spun on his heel and ran. "Get him!" someone yelled from the crowd. Naruto's small legs pumped furiously against the cobblestones. He ducked under a string of lanterns and darted into a narrow alleyway between two towering apartment complexes. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Behind him, he heard the heavy, angry footsteps of the drunk shinobi, joined quickly by several others. The mob mentality had taken hold. It was the worst night of the year for Naruto to be seen. The grief of the village, usually suppressed beneath forced smiles and stoic duty, was bubbling over, intoxicated by alcohol and the painful memories of the Kyuubi attack. They didn't care about the third Hokage's law forbidding the mention of the fox. Tonight, they just wanted someone to bleed for their pain. "Come back here, you little monster!" A voice echoed down the alley. Naruto didn't look back. He took a sharp right, vaulting over a knocked-over trash can. His bare toes scraped against the rough brick, leaving thin streaks of blood, but the adrenaline masked the pain. He knew the back streets of Konoha better than anyone. It was his sanctuary, his maze. He took another left, aiming for the rusted chain-link fence that led to the forested training grounds. If he could reach the trees, he could climb up high where they couldn't reach him. He could hide in the canopy until morning. But as he rounded the final corner, his heart plummeted into his stomach. The fence was gone. In its place, a newly constructed brick wall loomed, at least 15 feet high, blocking the path entirely. A dead end. Naruto skidded to a halt, his worn sandals squeaking against the damp pavement. He spun around, desperate to find another way out, but it was too late. The silhouettes of 4 men appeared at the entrance of the alley. The drunk shinobi was at the front, the glass sake bottle still gripped tightly in his fist. Beside him were 3 civilians, their faces contorted into ugly masks of hatred. Nowhere to run now, the drunk shinobi sneered, stepping into the dim light of a flickering street lamp. Please," Naruto stammered, backing up until his small shoulders hit the cold, unforgiving brick of the dead end. "Please, I didn't do anything to you. I don't even know you. You killed my wife." One of the civilians shouted, tears of rage streaming down his face. "You tore my house apart. You ruined everything." "I didn't!" Naruto screamed, tears finally spilling over his whisker-marked cheeks. "I'm just Naruto. I'm just a kid." "You're the Kyuubi," the shinobi snarled. He raised the bottle. "And tonight I'm finishing what the 4th Hokage started." The man lunged. Naruto squeezed his eyes shut and threw his arms over his head, curling into a tight ball against the wall. He braced himself for the shattering of glass, for the blinding pain, for the darkness that usually followed these encounters. He squeezed his eyes so tightly he saw sparks of light dancing behind his eyelids. "I don't want to die," Naruto thought, a desperate, primal scream echoing in the void of his own mind. "Please. I don't want to die. I want to live. I want to live." Deep within the darkest recesses of Naruto's being, behind the iron bars of an ancient, mystical seal, a massive entity stirred. The 9-tailed fox, a being of pure, unadulterated hatred and malice, cracked open one giant, blood-red eye. It felt the boy's terror. Normally, this was the moment the fox would leak a fraction of its corrosive, red chakra into the boy's system, saving its vessel while slowly poisoning his mind. The fox inhaled, ready to push its demonic chakra through the seal. But something else beat it to the punch. It wasn't red. It wasn't hot. And it certainly wasn't hateful. From the very marrow of Naruto's bones, from the deepest strands of his DNA, a dormant power, a power that had not walked the elemental nations in over half a century, snapped awake. It responded to Naruto's desperate plea for life not with a roar of destruction, but with a profound, terrifying surge of vitality. Instead of the burning sensation of the Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto felt a cool, rushing river of energy explode outward from his heart. It felt like plunging into a crystal-clear spring on a scorching summer day. It was green, vibrant, and overflowing with the unstoppable force of nature. Crack! The sound was deafening, like a thunderclap striking the earth directly beneath their feet. The drunk shinobi paused mid-swing, confused by the sudden tremor shaking the alley. He looked down. The solid cobblestone pavement beneath Naruto's feet was bulging, the stones cracking and grinding against each other, as if something massive was trying to claw its way out from the center of the earth. "What the?" the shinobi began. He didn't get to finish. With a sound like a bomb detonating, the ground beneath Naruto utterly shattered. Thick, heavily corded roots, each as thick as a grown man's torso, erupted from the dirt. They tore through the stone like wet paper. They did not grow at the slow, patient pace of nature. They exploded outward with the speed and violence of a high-ranking ninjutsu. The roots shot upward, intertwining and weaving together with blinding speed to form a massive, impenetrable dome of solid timber over the cowering child. But the forest did not stop there. The sheer volume of life force pouring out of Naruto's terrified, unconscious command could not be contained. More roots lashed out, violently whipping down the alleyway. The drunk shinobi was struck square in the chest by a rapidly expanding trunk of pale wood. The force of the blow shattered his ribs and launched him backward through the air. He flew a dozen feet before crashing violently into a dumpster, unconscious before he hit the ground. The other 3 civilians shrieked in absolute terror as the alleyway was suddenly transformed into a dense, hostile thicket. Branches whipped at their faces, and thorny vines tore at their clothes. The walls of the adjacent apartment buildings groaned under the pressure, as massive trees rooted themselves directly into the brick, expanding and cracking the foundations. "Monster!" one of them screamed, scrambling backward over the debris, his hands scraped and bleeding. "Run! It's a demon!" Within seconds the mob was gone, fleeing for their lives into the bustling streets of the festival, screaming for the Umbu, for the Hokage, for anyone to save them. Silence descended upon the alley, save for the gentle rustling of leaves and the deep, settling creaks of the newly birthed forest. Inside the dome, Naruto remained curled in a ball, his arms still covering his head. He was trembling violently, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. He waited for the blow, but it never came. Instead, the air around him had changed. It no longer smelled of stale beer, garbage, and damp brick. It smelled like pine needles. Like fresh earth after a spring rain. Like life. Slowly, hesitantly, Naruto lowered his arms and opened his eyes. He was in total darkness, save for a faint, bioluminescent green glow pulsing softly from the walls surrounding him. He blinked, adjusting his vision. He wasn't in the alley anymore. He was encased in a perfect hemisphere of smooth, intertwined wood. The bark was warm to the touch, humming with a gentle, rhythmic vibration. It felt almost like a heartbeat. Naruto reached out a trembling hand and pressed his palm flat against the wood. The moment his skin made contact, a rush of profound warmth flooded his system. His scraped toes stopped stinging. The bruises on his legs faded. The gnawing ache in his empty stomach dulled, replaced by a feeling of deep, spiritual nourishment. He felt safe. For the first time in his entire 7 years of existence, Naruto Uzumaki felt completely, unequivocally protected. What is this?" Naruto whispered into the quiet dome. The wood seemed to hum in response, a comforting vibration that echoed in his chest. But beneath that comfort, deep in his subconscious, another presence was reacting to the sudden display of power. Inside the seal, the mindscape of Naruto Uzumaki was a miserable place. It was a reflection of his waking life, cold, dark, and utterly devoid of comfort. It took the form of a massive, subterranean sewer. Water, murky and ankle-deep, flooded the stone floors, dripping endlessly from a ceiling obscured by shadows. At the end of a long, cavernous hallway stood a monolithic set of iron bars, stretching hundreds of feet into the air. In the center of the bars was a piece of parchment bearing the kanji 4 seal. Behind those bars lay the nine-tailed fox. Kurama had been resting, plotting, waiting for the boy to weaken. When the boy's life was threatened, Kurama had been prepared to force his own toxic chakra through the bars. But instead the fox had been violently shoved aside by a power that had flooded the boy's chakra network from the inside out. Now, Kurama stood at his full, terrifying height, his 9 massive tails lashing furiously behind him, churning the sewer water into a raging whirlpool. His blood-red eyes, normally slitted with cunning and malice, were blown wide in absolute shock. The giant beast leaned down, pressing his massive, wet snout against the iron bars, inhaling deeply. The scent drifting through the bars wasn't the boy's usual bright, slightly chaotic Uzumaki chakra. It was something else. It was a chakra signature so dense, so pure, and so unimaginably ancient that it commanded the very elements to bow. Kurama knew this scent. He knew it intimately. It was burned into his soul, a brand of humiliation that he had carried for over 60 years. He closed his eyes, and the dark sewer vanished, replaced by a memory forged in blood and thunder. He was roaring, his body clad in ethereal blue armor, the Susanoo of Madara Uchiha. The rain was falling in sheets, turning the earth into a muddy battlefield. Before him stood a man. Just a man, but that man possessed a power that defied logic. He wore crimson samurai armor, his long, dark hair plastered to his face by the rain. And around that man, the world itself rose up as an army, thousands of wooden hands, a colossal statue of Buddha carved from the living earth, dwarfing even Kurama's massive form. The man had looked down at Kurama not with hatred, but with a profound, infuriating pity. Nine Tails, the man's voice echoed in Kurama's memory, calm and unwavering despite the apocalyptic battle raging around them. Your power is too great. I cannot allow you to roam free. Then came the wood. The heavy, unbreakable timber that wrapped around Kurama's neck, forcing his head to the mud. The suppression of his chakra. The theft of his freedom. The moment he was reduced from a proud, elemental force of nature to a mere pet, a weapon to be locked away in a human vessel. Kurama's eyes snapped open, returning to the sewer. The red irises glowed with a hatred so intense it literally boiled the water around his paws. No, Kurama growled, his voice a tectonic rumble that shook the very foundations of Naruto's mindscape. No, no, no! It is impossible! He is dead. I watched him die. The fox threw his massive body against the iron cage. The bars shrieked in protest, but the seal held firm. Hashirama! Kurama roared into the darkness of the boy's mind, a scream of pure, unadulterated fury. Hashirama Senju! You dare? You dare mock me from beyond the grave? The fox clawed at the bars, sparks flying in the gloom. It all made a sickening, twisted sort of sense now. The boy's absurd vitality. His rapid healing. The sheer, overwhelming capacity of his chakra network. Kurama had always attributed it to the boy's Uzumaki lineage. The Uzumaki were cousins of the Senju, blessed with strong life forces. But this was no mere genetic hand-me-down. This was the soul. Kurama could feel it now, pulsing just beyond the cage. The reincarnation of his most hated enemy. The first Hokage. The god of shinobi. He had been reborn into the body of the very child chosen to be Kurama's jailer. It was a cosmic joke, a punishment delivered by the sage of six paths himself. I will kill you, Kurama snarled, his hot breath steaming against the cold iron. I will tear this seal apart, and I will rip your soul to shreds before you can fully awaken, Hashirama. Do you hear me? But his threats fell on deaf ears. Outside the seal, the boy named Naruto remained oblivious to the apocalyptic rage of his prisoner, completely captivated by the gentle glow of the wood that sheltered him. The Hokage's office. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage of Konohagakure, sat at his massive oak desk, a worn pipe clenched between his teeth. He let out a long, slow exhale, a thick cloud of sweet-smelling smoke rising to join the haze that already blanketed the ceiling of his office. He was tired. The kind of tired that sleep could no longer fix. At 68 years old, Hiruzen felt every single day of his long, blood-soaked life weighing down upon his shoulders. Tonight was the anniversary of his greatest failure. 7 years ago, he had been forced to watch as his successor, Minato Namikaze, sacrificed his life and his newborn son's future to save the village from the Nine Tails. Hiruzen had taken up the hat once more, promising to protect the boy, to ensure he was viewed as a hero. He had failed. Spectacularly, he rubbed his temples, staring at the mountain of paperwork on his desk. Most of it was festival logistics, security reports, and budget proposals. But beneath all that lay the real nightmare of running a military dictatorship masquerading as a hidden village, the politics. Danzo Shimura was making moves in the shadows again. The Uchiha clan was growing increasingly isolated and bitter, relegated to the outskirts of the village. And Naruto. Hiruzen closed his eyes, a pang of deep guilt twisting his stomach. He had ordered the Umbu to keep a discreet eye on Naruto tonight. He knew the villagers grew bold and malicious when they drank to forget their grief. He prayed the boy was safe in his apartment, hiding under his blankets until the sun rose. A sudden, sharp rapping at his window pulled Hiruzen from his dark thoughts. He opened his eyes. Perched on the windowsill was an Umbu black op wearing a porcelain mask painted to resemble a hound. It was Kakashi Hatake. Hiruzen waved his hand, releasing the locking seal on the window. Kakashi slid it open and stepped into the office, dropping to one knee in a fluid, practiced motion. "Report, Hound," Hiruzen said, his voice instantly shifting from weary old man to the commander of the village's military forces. "Lord Hokage," Kakashi said, his voice flat, though Hiruzen, who had known the boy since childhood, could detect a faint, unmistakable tremor of disbelief beneath the stoic exterior. "We have an incident in Sector 4, near the civilian market district." "The festival?" Hiruzen frowned, his grip tightening on his pipe. "A riot?" "A mob," Kakashi corrected. Approximately 4 individuals, heavily intoxicated, cornered the Uzumaki boy in a dead-end alley. Hiruzen's blood ran cold. The pipe slipped from his teeth, clattering onto the desk. "Naruto? Is he?" He couldn't even finish the sentence. If the villagers had killed the boy, the seal would break, and the 9 tails would be unleashed upon the village once more. "The boy is alive, Lord Hokage," Kakashi said quickly, sensing the old man's rising panic. "He is unharmed. But you need to see this for yourself. Immediately. I have locked down the perimeter with boar and crow. No civilians are allowed within a 2-block radius." Hiruzen stood up, his joints popping. He reached for his traditional white and red robes, slipping them over his shoulders. "What exactly am I coming to see, Hound? Did the 9 tails leak chakra? Did the boy lash out?" Kakashi hesitated. For an Umbu captain to hesitate was unheard of. He looked up at the Hokage, his lone visible eye, dark gray and entirely serious, locking onto Hiruzen's. "It wasn't the 9 tails, sir. It was trees." Hiruzen stopped moving. The room seemed to plunge into an eerie silence. "Trees? A forest, sir." It erupted from the cobblestones. It neutralized the attackers and formed a protective barrier around the boy. It's Mokutan." The air in the office grew suddenly heavy. Hiruzen's breath hitched in his throat. The word hung in the air between them, a ghost summoned from a bygone era. Mokutan would release the legendary Kekii Genkai of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. The power that had subdued the tailed beasts, the power that had literally grown the foundation of Konohagakure from barren earth. It was a power that had died with his sensei. Orochimaru, Hiruzen's rogue pupil, had spent years conducting horrific, unethical experiments trying to recreate it, resulting in the deaths of 59 children. Only one had survived, an Umbu currently operating under the codename Tenzo. But even Tenzo's would release was a pale, watered-down imitation of the first Hokage's true power. "Are you certain?" Hiruzen asked, his voice barely a whisper. "My Sharingan confirmed it," Kakashi replied. "The chakra signature. It's overflowing with life energy. It's so dense I can barely look directly at it." Hiruzen didn't say another word. He turned toward the window, his old muscles suddenly infused with a terrifying burst of adrenaline. He leaped into the night air, soaring over the rooftops of his village, moving with a speed that belied his age. Kakashi followed silently like a shadow. As Hiruzen leaped from roof to roof, the cool autumn wind whipping past his face, his mind raced. Naruto. A manifestation of wood release? How? The boy is an Uzumaki, yes, but the genetic lineage to the senju is too distant to produce a spontaneous awakening of a Kekii Genkai that didn't even manifest in Hashirama's own grandchildren, unless... Hiruzen squeezed his eyes shut as he bounded over a telephone pole. He remembered the teachings of the monks at the fire temple. He remembered the ancient legends of the Sage of Six Paths, and the concept of transmigration. The idea that certain souls of immense power and destiny, did not pass on to the Pure Land, but instead clung to the mortal realm, rebirthing themselves into new vessels to continue their ancient struggles. No. It cannot be. The implications. Danzo will tear the village apart to get his hands on the boy. The other villages will declare war if they find out the god of shinobi has returned. They reached Sector 4 in under 3 minutes. Hiruzen landed gracefully on the edge of a flat-roofed apartment building overlooking the alleyway. Below him, 3 Umbu operatives were standing guard at the entrance, their weapons drawn, keeping a small, murmuring crowd of curious festival-goers at bay. Hiruzen looked down into the alley, and his breath left his lungs in a sharp gasp. Kakashi hadn't exaggerated. The narrow, dirty alleyway had been completely swallowed by nature. Massive, winding roots, easily 10 feet in diameter, had burst through the earth, shattering the pavement, and crawling up the sides of the brick buildings like ivy on fast forward. Thick branches, covered in lush, vibrant green leaves, formed a canopy that blocked out the moonlight, and in the dead center of the alley, nestled safely between the colossal roots, was a perfectly smooth, enclosed dome of interwoven wood. Hiruzen recognized the jutsu instantly. He had seen it used 50 years ago, on battlefields soaked in blood. Mokutan Mokujo. The wood encampment wall. A defensive jutsu designed to completely encase the user and protect them from all harm. Trembling, Hiruzen leaped down from the roof, landing softly on a thick, protruding root. He waved off the umbu, signaling them to maintain the perimeter. He walked slowly toward the dome. The closer he got, the more overwhelmed his senses became. The air here was incredibly pure, stripped of the city's smog and grime. He could feel the chakra radiating from the wood. It was warm, impossibly vibrant, and carried a feeling of profound, overwhelming love for life. It felt exactly like his sensei. Tears pricked the corners of Hiruzen's aged eyes. For a brief, agonizing moment, he wasn't the tired old Hokage anymore. He was a young genin, looking up in awe at the towering, jovial figure of Hashirama Senju. He could almost hear Hashirama's booming laugh, could almost feel the man's heavy hand ruffling his hair. "Protect the king, Hiruzen!" Hashirama's voice echoed in his memory. "The children are the future. They are the king of Konoha." Hiruzen swallowed hard, forcing his emotions down. He had a duty to perform. He stepped up to the dome and placed a wrinkled hand against the smooth bark. "Naruto?" Hiruzen called out gently, keeping his voice soft and non-threatening. "Naruto, my boy." "It's me." "It's the old man." For a long moment, there was no response. Just the gentle rustling of the leaves above. Then, a small, muffled voice came from inside the wood. "Old man? Is that you?" "Yes, Naruto. It's me. You are safe now. The bad men are gone. Can you open this up for me?" Inside the dome, Naruto sniffled. He wiped his nose on the back of his hand. He didn't know how to open it. He didn't even know how he had made it in the first place. He placed his hands flat against the curved wall of his sanctuary. "I want to see the old man," Naruto thought. "Please open." The wood responded to his silent command. Hiruzen watched in absolute awe as the thick logs making up the dome began to untwist, sliding apart with a deep, groaning sound. The dome blossomed open like a lotus flower, revealing the small, blond boy curled up in the center. Naruto looked up, his large blue eyes rimmed with red, his cheeks stained with tears and grease. He looked terrified. When he saw the Hokage, Naruto didn't run to him. Instead, he scrambled backward, pressing himself against the far wall of the receding wood. "I'm sorry!" Naruto blurted out, his voice cracking with panic. "I'm so sorry, old man. I didn't mean to do it. The men were chasing me, and they wanted to hurt me, and then the ground just broke. I didn't mean to break the street. Please don't kick me out of the village. I'll clean it up, I promise. I'll pay for the broken rocks." Hiruzen's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Here was a child who possessed a power that could reshape continents, a power that made the mightiest warlords tremble in fear, and his first instinct was to apologize for breaking the pavement. Terrified of being abandoned, Hiruzen stepped forward, ignoring the dirt and the sap, and dropped to his knees. He reached out and pulled Naruto into a tight, fierce hug. He pressed the boy's head against his chest, shielding him from the cold night air. "Hush, Naruto," Hiruzen murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He stroked the boy's spiky blonde hair. "You did nothing wrong. You have nothing to apologize for. You protected yourself. You were very brave." Naruto froze, stiffening in the Hokage's arms. He wasn't used to being hugged. He wasn't used to being told he had done something right. Slowly, hesitantly, he brought his small arms up and wrapped them around the Hokage's neck, burying his face in the man's robes. He broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, the terror and adrenaline of the night finally catching up to him. Hiruzen held him, letting the boy cry. He looked up, his dark eyes sweeping over the massive trees that had overtaken the alleyway. The Umbu were watching him from the shadows, waiting for orders. Kakashi stood perfectly still, his lone eye wide, processing the impossible reality before them. Hiruzen knew what this meant. He knew that from this night forward, everything would change. Danzo would undoubtedly hear of this before morning. He would demand the boy be handed over to Root immediately, arguing that Konoha needed a living weapon, a new god of shinobi to secure their military dominance. The civilian council, blinded by their hatred of the fox, would call it a trick, a new demonic mutation. The Uchiha, already paranoid and isolated, would see the rebirth of their ancestral rival as a direct threat to their clan's survival. And beyond the village walls, the spies of Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri were always listening. If word reached the Reikage or the Tsuchikage that Konohagakure possessed the senju reincarnation who also held the nine-tailed fox, it would mean war. A preemptive strike to eliminate the threat before Naruto could grow into his power. Hiruzen tightened his grip on the weeping boy. He had failed Minato. He had failed to protect Naruto from the hatred of the village. He had allowed the boy to grow up lonely, starved, and despised. No more, Hiruzen thought, a terrifying, steely resolve settling over his aged features. His chakra flared, a dense, suffocating pressure that forced Kakashi and the other Umbu to take a subconscious step back. He was the professor. He was the god of shinobi's student. I will not fail again. I will protect this child. Even if I have to burn the very foundation of this village to the ground to root out the darkness, I will ensure he grows up to be the man he is destined to be. Hound, Hiruzen commanded, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. Kakashi materialized instantly at his side. Sir, take Boar and Crow. Erase the memories of the civilians who attacked the boy. I want them to wake up tomorrow believing they passed out in a tavern. Leave the shinobi. Bring him to the torture and interrogation department. Have Ibiki Marino personally extract every memory he has of this night, and then have him court-martialed for attempting to murder a village asset. Kakashi nodded. And the Wood Lord Hokage? How do we explain this? Hiruzen looked at the massive trees. They were too large to simply uproot and destroy secretly. We don't. Send for Tenzo. Tell him to claim responsibility for this. The official story is that Tenzo was practicing his wood release in an abandoned sector and lost control. If anyone questions it, refer them to me. Understood. Kakashi glanced down at the boy in Hiruzen's arms. Naruto had cried himself into exhaustion and was now fast asleep, his small chest rising and falling rhythmically against the Hokage's robes. And the boy, sir? Hiruzen stood up, effortlessly lifting Naruto into his arms. The boy was far too light for a 7-year-old. Naruto is coming with me, Hiruzen said firmly. He will not be returning to the orphanage. I will place him in a secure safe house under my direct protection. Kakashi bowed his head, sensing the dangerous edge in his leader's voice. As you command, Lord Hokage. Hiruzen turned and leapt back into the canopy of the village, carrying the sleeping boy away from the chaos. The cool wind rushed past them, ruffling Naruto's hair. As they flew over the sleeping village, the green glow of the Mokuton fading in the distance behind them, Hiruzen looked down at Naruto's peaceful face. The boy was a paradox. He held the darkest, most hateful entity in the world within his gut, yet his soul burned with the brightest, most vibrant light the world had ever seen. The seed had awakened. The will of fire had been reborn. Now, the old tree had to ensure the sapling had the time it needed to grow. Deep within the root headquarters, far beneath the bustling streets of Konohagakure, in a subterranean complex completely devoid of light and warmth, a single candle flickered on a stone desk. Danzo Shimura sat in the gloom, his visible eye scanning a scroll, his bandaged arm resting heavily on his lap. He was a man of shadows, a man who believed that a tree could only grow tall and strong if its roots plunged deep into the dirt and blood of the earth. A figure emerged from the darkness. A root operative wearing a blank porcelain mask, kneeling before the desk without making a sound. Report, Danzo ordered, his voice dry and gravelly. Lord Danzo, the operative spoke in a hollow, emotionless monotone. An incident occurred in Sector 4 15 minutes ago. The Uzumaki boy was attacked by civilians. Danzo didn't look up from his scroll. Irrelevant. The Umbu guard assigned by Hiruzen would have intervened. Did the boy suffer any permanent damage? The Umbu did not intervene in time, sir. But the boy was not harmed. Danzo paused, his quill hovering over a piece of parchment. He slowly raised his head, his single, dark eye narrowing. Explain. The boy defended himself, sir. He manifested a spontaneous, highly advanced Kekkei Genkai. A physical dome of solid timber, followed by the rapid growth of a localized forest. The quill in Danzo's hand snapped in half. Ink spilled across the desk, pooling like dark blood. Danzo sat perfectly still, his mind processing the impossible information. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. The boy he had been trying to legally acquire from Hiruzen for 7 long years. The boy who possessed boundless chakra. He possessed the wood release. A slow, terrifying smile spread across Danzo's scarred face. It was not a smile of joy, but of absolute, fanatical ambition. Hiruzen, Danzo whispered to the empty room, his voice trembling with a mixture of reverence and greed. You old fool. You thought you were protecting a demon. You were guarding a god. Danzo stood up, his cane clicking against the stone floor. He looked at the root operative. Mobilize Alpha and Beta squads. Have them monitor the Hokage's movements at all times. I want to know where he is keeping the boy. If the wood release has truly returned, the boy can no longer be left in Hiruzen's soft, incompetent hands. Danzo turned toward the darkness of his underground lair, his eye burning with a dark, obsessive fire. The boy belongs to the village. He belongs to Root. And I will have him. The morning sun did not reach the underground sanctum of the Hokage Tower, nor did the cheerful sounds of the village waking up from the festival. In the deepest, most secure sublevels of Kanehigakure, silence was an absolute law. Naruto Uzumaki opened his eyes to a ceiling he did not recognize. It wasn't the water-stained, peeling plaster of his dilapidated apartment in the red light district. It was smooth, polished cedar. He blinked, his brain sluggish, his limbs feeling unusually heavy, as if he had run across the entire land of fire with weights tied to his ankles. He shifted, and the sensation of crisp, clean cotton sheets brushing against his skin made him freeze. He was in a bed. A real bed. The mattress didn't have springs poking through the fabric, and the room didn't smell like mildew and sour milk. It smelled like fresh laundry and burning incense. Panic, sudden and sharp, pierced through his chest. Naruto scrambled backward, kicking the blankets off, his back hitting the headboard with a soft thud. He brought his knees up to his chest, his wide, cerulean eyes darting frantically around the room. Where was he? Was this a trick? Had the mob from last night finally caught him? And was this some kind of holding cell before they finished the job? The memories of the previous night came rushing back like a tidal wave of ice water. The alleyway? The drunk man with the broken sake bottle? The absolute, suffocating terror. And then the trees. The massive, impossible forest that had exploded from the cobblestones to swallow the alley, sheltering him in a warm, pulsing cocoon of living wood. Naruto looked down at his hands. They were small, callous from scrubbing floors and digging through trash, but they looked completely normal. No green glow. No bark. Just the hands of a 7-year-old boy. You're awake. Naruto flinched violently, his head snapping toward the sound. Sitting in a wicker chair in the corner of the room, illuminated by the soft glow of a paper lamp, was Hiruzen Sarutobi. The third Hokage was not wearing his official robes or his wide-brimmed hat. He wore a simple black kimono, looking older, smaller, and infinitely more tired than Naruto had ever seen him. A steaming cup of green tea rested on a small table beside him. Old man? Naruto whispered, his voice hoarse. Hiruzen smiled, though the expression did not quite reach his weary eyes. Good morning, Naruto. How are you feeling? Where am I? Naruto demanded, his voice trembling slightly despite his best efforts to sound brave. Am I in jail? For breaking the street? Hiruzen's smile faded into an expression of profound sorrow. He set his teacup down and slowly stood, his joints popping quietly in the still room. He walked over and sat on the edge of Naruto's bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. You are not in jail, Naruto, Hiruzen said softly, his deep, rumbly voice a soothing balm against Naruto's frayed nerves. You are in a safe house, one of my private residences, accessible only to myself and my most trusted Umbu-guards. You are completely safe here, but the trees, Naruto stammered, his hands gripping the bedsheets so tightly his knuckles turned white. I did it. I didn't mean to, I was just so scared, old man, and they were going to hurt me, and I just wanted a place to hide. I didn't mean to use a jutsu. I don't even know any jutsu. I know, Naruto, Hiruzen said. He reached out and gently rested his large, weathered hand on the boy's trembling shoulder. I know you didn't mean to. What happened last night was not a crime. It was a miracle. Naruto blinked, his panic faltering slightly. A miracle? Yes. Hiruzen let out a long, slow sigh, his gaze drifting toward the blank wall as if looking at ghosts only he could see. Long ago, before you or your parents were even born, this village was founded by a very great man. The first Hokage. His name was Hashirama Senju. He possessed a unique and powerful ability, a Kekkei Genkai, called Mokutan. The wood release. With it, he grew the very forests that surround our home. He built the foundations of Konoha with his own 2 hands. Naruto's eyes went wide. He had heard the stories of the first Hokage at the academy. Everyone knew he was a god among men. You mean, the stuff I did is the exact same power, Hiruzen confirmed, his tone carrying a weight that a 7-year-old could not fully comprehend. It is a power that has not naturally awakened in anyone since the first Hokage passed away. It is incredibly rare, Naruto. And incredibly dangerous. Naruto shrunk back slightly. Dangerous? Am I going to hurt someone? Not if you learn to control it, Hiruzen replied firmly, his dark eyes locking onto Naruto's blue ones. But there are people in this world, Naruto, both outside our village and, regrettably, within it, who would view your power as a weapon. They would try to use you. They would try to force you to fight their wars and crush their enemies, simply because you hold the legacy of the first Hokage within you. Naruto swallowed hard. Like the men in the alley? No, Hiruzen said, his voice darkening just a fraction. Worse. The men in the alley acted out of blind, foolish fear. The people I am speaking of act out of calculated ambition. That is why you cannot return to your apartment. You cannot return to the academy, not yet. What? But I'm supposed to be a ninja. I have to be Hokage so everyone will stop looking at me like I'm a monster. Naruto protested, the familiar sting of tears pricking his eyes. You will be a ninja, Hiruzen reassured him quickly, squeezing his shoulder. But you need a different kind of training. Specialized training. From this day forward you will live here. I have assigned someone very special to watch over you, to protect you, and to teach you how to understand this new power growing inside you. Naruto sniffled, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. So I have to hide? You are not hiding, Naruto, Hiruzen said gently, tapping the boy over his heart. You are growing roots. A tree cannot withstand a storm if its roots are shallow. We are going to make sure your roots are deep, strong, and unbreakable. Naruto looked down at his hands again. The idea of being special, of having the power of the first Hokage, was overwhelming. But the idea of not having to go back to the cold, lonely apartment, of not having to face the glares of the villagers every morning, that sounded like heaven. Okay, old man, Naruto whispered, leaning subtly into the warmth of the Hokage's hand. I'll stay here. Hiruzen smiled, a genuine expression of relief washing over his aged features. Good boy. Now get dressed. There are clothes in the wardrobe. Breakfast is on the table in the next room. Eat as much as you like. I have a meeting to attend to, but I will send your new teacher to you shortly. With a final, affectionate pat on the head, the third Hokage stood and walked out of the bedroom, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him. Naruto sat in the bed for a moment longer, listening to the absolute silence of the safe house. For the first time in his life, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. The Hokage Tower Council Chambers. The atmosphere in the council chambers was toxic. The air was thick with the smell of old parchment, stale smoke, and the palpable, suffocating tension of 4 powerful individuals locked in a quiet war. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat at the head of the long, polished wooden table, his face an unreadable mask of stone. He wore his official Hokage robes now, the white and red fabric draped immaculately over his shoulders, his wide-brimmed hat casting a dark shadow over his eyes. To his left sat his old teammates, Hamura Mitokado and Koharu Yuditane. They looked deeply troubled, their wrinkled faces pinched with anxiety, their hands steepled before them. And at the far end of the table, sitting perfectly upright with both hands resting heavily on the pommel of his cane, was Danzo Shimura. "This is madness, Hiruzen," Danzo's voice sliced through the silence like a rusted blade. It was raspy, dry, and entirely devoid of warmth. "Absolute madness. You are letting sentimentality cloud your judgment, just as you always have." "My judgment is perfectly clear, Danzo," Hiruzen replied, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. The sheer density of his chakra, leaking just a fraction into the room, made the wooden walls groan in protest. "Is it?" Koharu interjected, her tone shrill. "Hiruzen, listen to reason." Sector 4 was nearly torn apart. The reports state the boy manifested an entire grove of trees in a matter of seconds. Spontaneous, unadulterated wood release. He is the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. If he cannot control the fox, he is a threat. If he cannot control the wood release, he is a catastrophe, which is precisely why he requires containment, Danzo said smoothly, his single visible eye locking onto Hiruzen. He is an unstable asset. The power of the first Hokage belongs to Konoha, not to a deeply traumatized 7-year-old child living in a civilian apartment. He must be placed en route immediately. My operatives can train him. We can strip away his emotional volatility. We can turn him into the ultimate weapon to deter IWA and Kumo. Imagine it, Hiruzen. A soldier who can subdue tailed beasts with a thought. Hiruzen's hands slowly clenched into fists beneath the table. The memory of Naruto, curled up in a ball, apologizing for trying to survive, flashed through his mind. "You speak of him as if he were a kunai to be sharpened, Danzo," Hiruzen said coldly. "He is a boy. Minato's son." "Minato is dead," Danzo fired back, his cane striking the floorboard with a sharp thwack. "And his dying wish was for the boy to be a hero. How can he be a hero if he is allowed to wander the streets, attacked by drunks, terrified of his own shadow? I offer him purpose. I offer him discipline. I can mold him into the savior this village needs." "You would mold him into a hollow shell," Hiruzen countered, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "You would strip him of his humanity, just as you do to all your rude operatives. You think you understand the wood release, Danzo, because you spent years butchering children with Orochimaru trying to replicate it." Hamura and Koharu gasped, but Danzo did not flinch. "I did what was necessary for the survival of the leaf," Danzo said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The first Hokage's power is the only true deterrent against the Uchiha and the other nations. And now, the heavens have gifted us a true reincarnation. You cannot keep him hidden forever, Hiruzen. The Akatsuki are gathering in the shadows. The cloud is expanding its military. When the world learns that the god of shinobi has been reborn in the body of a Jinchuriki, they will not send assassins. They will send armies. Let them come," Hiruzen stated, his voice ringing with absolute, unshakable authority. The three elders stared at him in shock. Hiruzen stood up, leaning his knuckles against the table. He was no longer the professor, the kind old man who handed out candy to academy students. He was the supreme commander of Konohagakure's armed forces. "Naruto Uzumaki will not be handed over to Root," Hiruzen declared, his words carrying the weight of absolute law. "He will not be locked in a cell. He will not be stripped of his emotions. Hashirama Senju did not build this village with a heart of stone, Danzo. He built it with love, with compassion, and with the will of fire. If Naruto is truly Hashirama's successor, then he must be raised with those same ideals. He must learn to love this village, so that he will naturally want to protect it." "Love is a vulnerability," Danzo sneered. "Love is the source of true strength," Hiruzen shot back. "My decision is final. Naruto has been relocated to an undisclosed safe house. He is under my personal, direct jurisdiction. Any attempt by Root to surveil, contact, or acquire the boy will be considered an act of high treason against the Hokage. And I promise you, Danzo. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed, a terrifying killer intent flooding the room, causing the candle flames on the walls to flicker and die. I will execute you myself if you try. Silence, thick and suffocating, descended upon the chamber. Hamura and Kohara looked away, unable to meet Hiruzen's gaze. Danzo stared back, his expression unreadable, though the muscle in his jaw ticked visibly. As you command. Lord Hokage, Danzo finally said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Hiruzen straightened up, pulling his chakra back into his body. This meeting is adjourned. The official story remains, Umbu Captain Tenzo was conducting a classified training exercise in Sector 4 and lost control of his jutsu. That is the only narrative that leaves this room. Without another word, Hiruzen turned and swept out of the chambers, his robes billowing behind him. Danzo remained seated at the table long after the others had left. He raised his bandaged arm, staring at it in the gloom. Beneath those bandages lay the grotesque fruits of his labor with Orochimaru, the pale, twisted flesh infused with Hashirama's cells. He had sacrificed so much to attain just a fraction of the first power, and a miserable, pathetic orphan had inherited the entirety of the soul. We shall see, Hiruzen, Danzo whispered to the empty room. A tree grown in a greenhouse is weak. Eventually, the boy will need to step into the dark. And when he does, Root will be waiting to catch him. Umbu headquarters locker room. Tenzo stared at his reflection in the cracked mirror of his locker. He was a young man, only 18 years old, but his eyes carried the haunted, weary look of a veteran who had seen entirely too much death. He ran a hand through his messy brown hair, his large, dark eyes devoid of their usual spark. He wore the standard black uniform of the Umbu, the silver flak jacket strapped tightly to his chest. On the bench beside him rested his porcelain mask, painted to resemble a cat. Tenzo's mind was a maelstrom. Last night he had been pulled from his patrol route and ordered by Kakashi to take the blame for a massive, catastrophic manifestation of wood release in the civilian district. When he had arrived at the scene, Tenzo had nearly fallen to his knees. The sheer scale of the trees, the density of the life force radiating from the bark, it was intoxicating. It was perfect. Tenzo possessed the wood release, yes. But he knew deep in his heart that his power was a counterfeit. He was the sole survivor of 60 children who had been injected with the stolen, desecrated cells of the first Hokage by Orochimaru. His body was a science experiment. When Tenzo used Mokutan, it felt forced. It felt like dragging water from a dry well. He had to meticulously balance his earth and water chakra natures, constantly fighting his own biology to produce a few pillars of wood. But the forest in the alleyway, that hadn't been forced. That had been an explosion of natural, unbridled life. And it had come from a 7-year-old boy, Tenzo. The voice, quiet but commanding, pulled Tenzo from his thoughts. He spun around, dropping to one knee instantly as the third Hokage materialized in the center of the locker room via a swirl of leaves. Lord Hokage, Tenzo said, keeping his head bowed. Rise, Tenzo, Hiruzen said gently. Tenzo stood, noting that the Hokage looked incredibly exhausted, yet there was a strange, unyielding spark in his eyes today. You saw the alleyway? Hiruzen stated, getting straight to the point. Yes, sir, Tenzo replied. I have assumed full responsibility, as ordered. The civilian damage reports are being routed to my unit's budget. Good. But you understand what you saw? Tenzo hesitated, looking down at his hands. Sir, I have studied the archives of the first Hokage extensively to understand my own abilities. The jutsu used last night, the wood encampment wall, it was flawless. The chakra density was something I cannot replicate, even if I drained my reserves to zero. The boy. Naruto. Tenzo swallowed hard. Is he a senju? In spirit, yes, Hiruzen said softly. The boy is the vessel of the Nine Tails, as you know. But last night, in a moment of mortal terror, something else awoke within him. The very soul of Hashirama Senju. Tenzo felt his breath catch in his throat. A reincarnation. He had heard the myths, the esoteric teachings of the ninja monks, but to stand before the living proof. Lord Hokage, if the boy possesses the true wood release, he will be a target. Every village, every rogue ninja, Danzo. Tenzo shuddered slightly at the mention of his former rude commander. They will tear him apart. Which is why he needs a guard, Hiruzen said, stepping closer to the young Umbu. But more than that, Tenzo, he needs a guide. He is terrified of his own power. He thinks he is a monster because of the fox, and now he fears he will be locked away because of the wood. Hiruzen reached out and picked up Tenzo's porcelain cat mask from the bench. He looked at the painted face, then back to Tenzo. I am removing you from active Umbu duty, effective immediately. Tenzo's eyes widened. Sir, you are no longer a faceless shadow in the dark, Hiruzen declared. Your new mission is an S rank, long-term assignment. You will move into Safe House Delta. You will be Naruto's guardian, his teacher, and his protector. But most importantly, Tenzo, I want you to take off the mask. The boy has had enough guards staring at him with cold, hidden faces. I want you to be his older brother. Tenzo stared at the Hokage, utterly stunned. He had been raised in a test tube, trained in the dark by Danzo to be an emotionless killer, and then rescued by Kakashi and Hiruzen to be an Umbu. He didn't know how to be a brother. He didn't know how to be normal. Sir, I don't know if I'm qualified, Tenzo stammered. My Mokutan is a fake. What could I possibly teach the true successor of the first Hokage? You can teach him control, Hiruzen smiled kindly. You had to learn the hard way how to balance your chakra to create wood. Naruto will have the raw power, but he will have zero control, especially with the Ninetales actively sabotaging his chakra network. He needs someone who understands the burden of being a freak of nature, Tenzo. Someone who knows what it feels like to be feared for what is inside their blood. Tenzo looked at his hands again. He remembered the cold operating tables of Orochimaru. He remembered the feeling of being utterly alone. He looked up, his jaw set with newfound determination. I understand, Lord Hokage. I will protect him with my life. I know you will, Hiruzen said. He handed the cat mask back to Tenzo. Keep this as a reminder of where you came from. But from now on, to him, your name is Yamato. It will serve as an alias to protect your identity from anyone who might be watching. Yamato, Tenzo repeated, testing the sound of the name. It felt grounded. Solid. Yes, sir. Go to him, Hiruzen ordered softly. He is waiting. Safe House Delta, the inner courtyard. Naruto sat cross-legged on the wooden engawa porch, overlooking the small, enclosed Zen garden of the safe house. He had eaten until his stomach physically hurt, 3 bowls of rice, grilled salmon, and tamagoyaki. It was the best meal of his life. Now, bathed in the late morning sunlight, he stared out at the meticulously raked white gravel and the carefully placed stones. It was peaceful here. The high walls of the compound blocked out the sounds of the village entirely, but his mind was far from peaceful. He couldn't stop thinking about the trees. He kept looking at his palms, willing them to glow green, willing a branch to sprout from his fingertips, but nothing happened. It felt like a dream. Was it the monster? Naruto thought, a cold shiver running down his spine. The villagers always called him a demon. Was the wood part of the demon's power? It's a beautiful garden, isn't it? Naruto yelped, scrambling backward until his back hit the sliding shoji doors. He hadn't heard anyone approach. Standing at the edge of the porch was a tall young man. He wasn't wearing an Umbu uniform, just standard jounin trousers and a dark blue shirt. He had messy brown hair, kind but intense dark eyes, and a strange, wooden headpiece guarding his forehead. Who are you? Naruto demanded, trying to sound fierce, though his voice cracked slightly. The man offered a gentle, disarming smile and slowly sat down on the porch, keeping a respectful distance. My name is Yamato, the man said, his voice calm and even. The Hokage sent me. Naruto narrowed his eyes, deeply suspicious. Are you a guard? Are you here to make sure I don't break anything else? I'm here to make sure no one else tries to break you, Yamato corrected smoothly. And I'm here to teach you. Teach me what? I don't even know how to make a shadow clone, Naruto muttered, looking away, his bravado fading into his usual insecurity. I'm the dead last at the academy. I can't even mold chakra right. Yamato chuckled softly. Well, to be fair, standard academy jutsu are designed for normal chakra networks. Your chakra network is a bit more complicated. Yamato leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The Hokage told you about the first Hokage, right? Naruto nodded slowly. He said I have his power. The Mokutan. Do you know what Mokutan is, Naruto? It's wood, it's life, Yamato said, his tone turning reverent. He held out his right hand, palm facing upward. Standard ninja use elemental transformations. Fire, water, earth, wind, lightning. They destroy. But Mokutan is different. It is the combination of water and earth, infused with an overwhelming amount of physical, living energy. Watch. Yamato closed his eyes. He took a slow, deep breath. Naruto leaned in closer, his curiosity overriding his fear. Slowly, a faint, pale green aura enveloped Yamato's hand. From the center of his palm, a tiny sprout pushed through his skin. It didn't look painful, it looked entirely natural. The sprout grew, branching out, its bark twisting beautifully into a miniature bonsai tree, complete with tiny, vibrant green leaves. Naruto's jaw dropped. His eyes sparkled with absolute wonder. Whoa! Yamato opened his eyes and smiled, handing the little wooden bonsai to Naruto. Naruto took it with trembling fingers. The wood felt warm. It hummed with the exact same comforting vibration he had felt in the alleyway. He looked up at Yamato, his guard completely melting away. You're like me, Naruto whispered, a profound sense of relief washing over his young heart. He wasn't alone. He wasn't the only freak in the world. Yamato's smile tightened just a fraction with hidden sorrow, but he nodded. I am. And I'm going to teach you how to do this on command. But first, you have to learn how to find that power inside yourself without being terrified. How do I do that? Naruto asked eagerly, clutching the little bonsai to his chest. We start with meditation, Yamato instructed, shifting his posture so he was sitting cross-legged, his hands resting on his knees. Copy me. Sit up straight. Close your eyes. Naruto eagerly mirrored the older ninja, crossing his legs and squeezing his eyes shut. Now Yamato's voice guided him softly. Breathe in through your nose. Out through your mouth. Ignore the sounds around you. Look inward. Try to feel the energy in your stomach. It should feel like a warm pool of water. Naruto frowned in concentration. He took a deep breath. He tried to look inside himself, past the lingering fear, past the hunger he used to feel every day. He searched for the warmth of the trees. He found something, but it wasn't a warm pool of water. It was a wall of iron. What is that? Naruto thought, his mental avatar pressing against a cold, massive structure deep within his consciousness. He pushed past the feeling of iron, looking deeper. Suddenly, the temperature inside his body skyrocketed. Boom! It wasn't a sound, it was a physical shockwave that violently ripped through Naruto's chakra network. It felt like someone had poured boiling acid directly into his veins. In the physical world, Naruto let out a blood-curdling scream, his eyes snapping open. But his eyes weren't cerulean blue anymore. The irises had bled into a demonic, slitted crimson. The whisker marks on his cheeks thickened, turning feral and jagged. Naruto! Yamato shouted, his relaxed demeanor instantly vanishing. He lunged forward as a sickening, bubbling red chakra began to leak from Naruto's skin. The air around the boy instantly turned toxic, the grass beneath him withering and turning to ash in seconds. The sheer malice radiating from the chakra made Yamato's instincts scream in terror. The Nine Tails! Yamato realized with horror. It's rejecting him. It's actively attacking his chakra pathways. Yamato slammed his hand onto Naruto's chest, his own Mokutan chakra flaring wildly as he tried to suppress the demonic energy. Naruto! Fight it! Breathe! But Naruto couldn't hear him. The physical world had vanished entirely. The mindscape. Naruto fell. He splashed violently into ankle-deep, freezing water, the impact knocking the wind out of his small lungs. He gasped, scrambling to his hands and knees, coughing violently. The air here tasted foul, like sulfur and rotting blood. He looked around, shivering uncontrollably. He was in a massive, cavernous sewer. The walls were made of damp, ancient stone, and pipeworks ran along the ceiling, dripping dark, tainted water into the gloom. Where am I? Naruto whimpered, his voice echoing endlessly down the dark corridor. You dare enter my domain, you parasitic filth? The voice was a physical blow. It was a tectonic rumble that shook the very foundation of the sewer, vibrating through the water and straight into Naruto's bones. Naruto slowly, terrifyingly, raised his head. At the end of the corridor stood a set of colossal iron bars, stretching up into the darkness. And behind those bars, illuminated by a sickly, red glow, were two massive eyes. They were the size of houses, slitted with absolute, unfathomable hatred. Slowly, the creature stepped forward out of the shadows. It was a fox. But calling it a fox was like calling a hurricane a breeze. It was a titan of matted crimson fur, with jagged teeth the size of great swords, and 9 massive tails that thrashed violently behind it, churning the water into a raging storm. Naruto couldn't breathe. The sheer, overwhelming aura of the beast paralyzed his lungs. This was it. This was the monster the villagers talked about. This was the reason he was hated. It lived inside him. I should have known, the 9 tails snarled, lowering its massive head until its snout was pressed directly against the iron bars. Its hot, sulfuric breath blasted over Naruto, making the boy's hair whip wildly. I felt your disgusting, sickeningly sweet chakra last night. You think you can hide behind the face of a pathetic brat? You think I wouldn't recognize the stench of your soul? I don't know what you're talking about. Naruto screamed, tears streaming down his face as he scrambled backward in the water. Leave me alone! Go away! Kurama roared, an ear-splitting sound of pure fury. One of his massive claws slammed into the iron bars. The seal hummed, flashing with blue text, holding the beast back. But the sheer force of the blow sent a wave of water crashing over Naruto, knocking him flat on his back. Do not play the fool with me, Hashirama! Kurama bellowed, the name echoing like a curse. You stole my freedom. You bound me in chains of wood and locked me away like a dog, and now you dare to reincarnate into my jailer? I will burn this boy's mind to ash. I will flood his veins with my poison until his heart stops, and your soul is cast back into the abyss. Kurama inhaled deeply, his chest expanding. A massive sphere of swirling, dense red and blue chakra began to form in front of his jaws, a tailed beast bomb, compressed down to fit within the mindscape. Naruto stared at the glowing orb of death. The heat radiating from it was blistering. The beast was going to kill him. It was going to destroy his mind from the inside out, and there was absolutely nothing he could do. He was just a kid. He was a loser. He was the village freak. No. The thought came out of nowhere. It wasn't a desperate plea for survival like the night before. It was a spark of sheer, unadulterated indignation. Why did he have to die? Why did everyone, from the villagers to this giant, stupid fox, get to decide his worth? He hadn't done anything to them. As Kurama prepared to unleash the blast, the freezing water beneath Naruto's hands began to change. The putrid, sulfuric smell of the sewer was suddenly pierced by the sharp, crisp scent of pine needles and rich earth. Naruto slowly pushed himself up from the water. His head was bowed, his golden bangs shadowing his eyes. He stopped trembling. Die, and take your curse wood with you! Kurama roared, thrusting his head forward to unleash the blast. But before the chakra could leave the fox's mouth, Naruto snapped his head up. His eyes were not the terrified, tear-filled eyes of a 7-year-old orphan. For one fleeting, terrifying microsecond, Kurama did not see a blonde boy. He saw a tall man with long, dark hair, wearing crimson samurai armor, his face marked with the dark, jagged lines of sage mode. The man's eyes were utterly serene, yet harder than diamond. Naruto slammed both of his small hands onto the surface of the sewer water. Shut up! Naruto screamed, his voice harmonizing with a deeper, ancient resonance that echoed through the cavern. The water exploded. It wasn't a gradual growth. It was a violent, instantaneous eruption. Dozens of massive, heavily armored wooden pillars, shaped like interlocking dragon scales, violently burst through the water. They shot forward with blinding speed, twisting and weaving through the gaps in the iron bars. Kurama's eyes widened in sheer panic. No! The wooden pillars slammed into the fox's jaw, violently snapping his mouth shut. The tailed beast bomb detonated internally, the muffled explosion sending a shockwave through the fox's massive body, dropping him to his knees. More pillars shot out, wrapping tightly around Kurama's neck, his wrists, and his tails, pinning the colossal beast mercilessly to the floor of the cage. The wood glowed with a blinding, vibrant green light, aggressively absorbing the corrosive red chakra, purifying it, and feeding it back into the environment. The dark, gloomy sewer suddenly burst into light. Green moss and vibrant vines began to crawl up the damp stone walls, transforming the miserable prison into a lush, subterranean grotto. Naruto stood up, his chest heaving, his hands still pressed forward. He stared at the giant beast, who was struggling helplessly against the unbreakable timber. The ancient, serene presence inside Naruto faded, receding back into his subconscious, leaving the boy panting and utterly confused by what he had just done. But the fear was gone, replaced by a strange, quiet certainty. "I don't know who Hashirama is," Naruto said, his voice ringing clear and steady in the newly vibrant mindscape. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I live here. And you are not going to hurt me anymore." Kurama let out a muffled, strangled growl of absolute hatred, his red eyes burning holes into the boy. But he could not move. The wood held him perfectly still, a humiliating reminder of the god who had conquered him. Naruto closed his eyes, suddenly feeling incredibly sleepy. The green light of the grotto flared, and the mindscape faded to white. The physical world, Naruto gasped, his eyes flying open. The demonic red chakra that had been bubbling on his skin vanished instantly, sucked back into his seal. The feral whisker marks thinned out, returning to normal. The oppressive, toxic aura in the courtyard was replaced by a massive, surging wave of pure, life-giving energy. Yamato, who had been struggling to hold Naruto down, was suddenly thrown backward by the burst of positive chakra. He skidded across the wooden porch, his eyes wide with shock. Naruto slumped forward, completely exhausted, breathing heavily. He looked up at Yamato, a tired, goofy grin spreading across his face. "I did it, Yamato-sensei," Naruto whispered, his eyelids drooping. "I found the warm water. I made the bad dog sit down." Yamato stared at the boy. The bad dog? Did he just suppress the nine tails internally? Using Mokuton? On his first attempt, Yamato scrambled forward and caught Naruto just as the boy lost consciousness, cradling the exhausted child in his arms. Yamato looked down at the courtyard, where the red chakra had burned the grass away. A patch of beautiful, vibrant white lilies had spontaneously bloomed from the ashes, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Yamato looked back down at the sleeping boy. The sheer potential resting in his arms was terrifying. Danzo was right about one thing: this boy could change the world. But as Yamato brushed a strand of blonde hair from Naruto's forehead, he felt an overwhelming surge of protective instinct, stronger than any umbu conditioning he had ever received. "You did good, Naruto," Yamato whispered, holding the boy tight. "Rest now. Tomorrow, we start for real." High above the safe house walls, perched silently on a telephone pole, a crow with a perfectly red, three-tomo Sharingan eye stared down at the courtyard. It watched the display of the wood release, let out a soft caw, and dissolved into a swirl of black feathers, carrying the impossible news back into the shadows. The training grounds of Safe House Delta were no longer just a simple Zen garden. Over the past 5 years, they had been transformed into a dense, sprawling woodland, a contained biome of towering oaks, thick creeping vines, and dense bamboo groves. It was an environment shaped not by decades of natural growth, but by the sheer, unyielding will of a single, growing boy. 12-year-old Naruto Uzumaki stood in the center of a small clearing, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his chin onto the crushed grass below. He was no longer the malnourished, terrified child who had cowered in an alleyway. 5 years of steady, nutritious meals provided by Hiruzen, coupled with the rigorous, relentless physical conditioning overseen by Yamato, had fundamentally changed him. Naruto was tall for his age, his shoulders broad and his muscles coiled with a lean, functional density. He wore a dark orange combat jacket with a thick black collar, the red Uzumaki spiral stitched proudly on the back, and sturdy black shinobi trousers taped at the ankles. But it wasn't just his physique that had changed. It was his presence. He exuded an aura of profound, almost oppressive vitality. The very air around him felt heavier, charged with the scent of fresh rain and crushed leaves. Again, a voice called out from the canopy above. Naruto didn't look up. He didn't need to. He closed his eyes, his feet planted firmly shoulder-width apart, and clasped his hands together, his fingers locking into the snake seal. He pulled on his chakra. Deep within his gut, he felt the familiar, warm reservoir of his own life force. He drew it up through his coils, visualizing the shape and structure of the jutsu. But as the energy reached his chest, another sensation flared, a sudden, violent spike of blistering heat. Not today, you overgrown furball, Naruto thought fiercely, his brow furrowing. Within the seal, the nine-tailed fox let out a derisive snort, intentionally bleeding a fraction of its chaotic, corrosive red chakra into Naruto's perfectly molded pathways, just enough to disrupt the frequency. Standard Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto shouted, forcing the chakra outward. With a pathetic poof of white smoke, a clone materialized beside him. It was a horrific, pale, gelatinous blob of a copy. It groaned miserably, its eyes rolling in opposite directions, before collapsing into a puddle of useless chakra. Naruto groaned, dropping his hands and kicking the dirt. Damn it! Every single time, Yamato dropped down from the branches, landing silently beside the boy. The Umbu captain had shed his mask years ago, serving openly as Naruto's guardian and mentor. He offered a sympathetic smile, handing Naruto a canteen of water. Don't let it frustrate you, Naruto, Yamato said gently. Your chakra control is actually phenomenal. The issue is interference. Standard E-rank ninjutsu rely on delicate, unprotected chakra molding. The Nine-Tails knows this, and it knows exactly how to spike your network to destabilize the form. It's just annoying, Naruto grumbled, taking a long drink. Tomorrow is the Genin graduation exam. If Iruka-sensei asks for a normal clone, I'm going to fail. And then I'll look like an idiot. You won't fail, Yamato reassured him, crossing his arms. Your scores in taijutsu, weapon shuriken jutsu, and physical endurance are the highest the Academy has seen in a decade. Iruka is aware of your unique handicap with standard clones. But more importantly, Naruto, you are trying to force water through a sieve. You are not meant for standard, ethereal illusions. Your power is physical. It is life. Yamato stepped back, his face turning serious. Show me the alternative. Don't fight the interference. Overwhelm it. Naruto took a deep breath. He handed the canteen back to Yamato and stepped into the center of the clearing. He closed his eyes once more. This time, he didn't try to mold a delicate, standard clone. He reached deeper. Past the bubbling, hateful red chakra of the fox, down into the very marrow of his bones, where an ancient, emerald-green light pulsed with the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. He didn't just mold chakra, he created life. Naruto's eyes snapped open, blazing with an intense, focused cerulean blue. He slapped his hands together, the loud crack echoing through the trees. Mokuton, Moku Bunshin no Jutsu. Would release, would clone technique. The earth beneath Naruto's feet cracked. Roots shot upward, spiraling around his legs and violently expanding into a thick, solid pillar of pale wood. The wood began to rapidly carve itself, shedding bark and splintering into perfect, anatomical shapes. Colors bled into the timber: blonde hair, blue eyes, an orange jacket. Within 3 seconds, a perfect, living duplicate of Naruto Uzumaki stepped out of the wooden pillar. It didn't waver. It didn't groan. It stood with the exact same solid, heavy presence as the original. Yamato watched with a mixture of immense pride and lingering awe. He had spent years trying to master the wood clone, and his were still easily discernible by elite Sharingan users. Naruto's clone, however, was flawless. It was a complete cellular recreation, fused with the boy's massive chakra. Perfect, Yamato praised, tossing a wooden kunai at the clone. The clone caught it effortlessly, twirling it around its finger with a grin. Your Mokuton entirely bypasses the Nine-Tails interference because the wood itself acts as a natural suppressor. You are grounding your chakra into physical matter. Yeah, well, I can't exactly use this at the Academy, Naruto sighed, dispelling the clone. It didn't poof into smoke. It seamlessly melted back into a pile of wooden seeds that sank into the grass. The old man said I have to keep the Mokuton a secret until I'm an official ninja. Only you, the Hokage, and a few Umbu know, and for good reason, Yamato said, his tone darkening slightly. There are eyes in the village, Naruto. Eyes that would love nothing more than to drag you into the underground and turn you into a weapon. Tomorrow, you graduate. You step out of the safe house and into the real world. You will be assigned a Jounin sensei, and you will be placed on a team. Yamato stepped forward, placing a hand on Naruto's shoulder. You are ready. You have the will of fire burning brighter in you than anyone I have ever met. But remember what we talked about. Do not reveal your true hand unless it is a matter of life and death. Let them think you are just a strong, capable brawler. Naruto looked up at his surrogate older brother, his expression hardening into a determined, confident smile. It was a smile that didn't just belong to a boisterous kid. It was a smile that carried the shadow of a man who had once united warring clans. Don't worry, Yamato-sensei, Naruto said, his fist clenching. I'm going to pass. And I'm going to become a Hokage that doesn't have to hide in the shadows. The academy graduation day. The classroom was buzzing with nervous, electric energy. Dozens of students sat at their wooden desks, whispering frantically, adjusting their forehead protectors, or staring blankly at the chalkboard, praying they had passed the final written exams. At the back of the class, sitting by the window, Sasuke Uchiha rested his chin on his steepled fingers. He was a picture of brooding perfection. Dressed in a high-collared blue shirt bearing the proud red and white fan of the Uchiha clan, his dark, onyx eyes scanned the room with a mixture of boredom and cold calculation. He had easily secured the top score in the class. His ninjutsu was flawless. His shuriken jutsu was legendary. He was the sole survivor of the Uchiha massacre, driven by a singular, consuming goal, to attain enough power to kill his older brother, Itachi. But as his eyes swept over his classmates, ignoring the swooning gaze of Sakura Haruno and the annoying chatter of Ino Yamanaka, his gaze locked onto the boy sitting 2 rows ahead of him, Naruto Uzumaki. Sasuke's eyes narrowed slightly. Everything about Naruto irritated him, but not in the way the other students did. The others were weak. They were loud, obnoxious children playing at being ninja. Naruto was an anomaly. 5 years ago, Naruto had vanished from the public eye. The villagers whispered that the Hokage had locked the demon away. But a year later, Naruto had enrolled in the academy. He didn't live in the civilian sectors, and he didn't walk home with the other kids. He was escorted by ambushados, and his physical abilities were terrifying. Sasuke remembered their last sparring match in the courtyard. Sasuke had used his superior speed and technical Uchiha katas, expecting to easily dismantle the blonde. But when their forearms clashed, Sasuke had felt like he had kicked a mountain. Naruto didn't use elegant techniques. His taijutsu was heavy, rooted, and incredibly destructive. A single, glancing blow from Naruto had sent Sasuke skidding 10 feet across the dirt, his arm entirely numb for an hour. He's hiding something, Sasuke thought, his fingernails digging into his palms. He fails the basic clone jutsu every time, yet he moves with the raw power of a chunin. His chakra, it's sickeningly dense. The ancestral rivalry, buried deep within Sasuke's DNA, hummed in the back of his mind. His Sharingan, though unawakened, practically itched whenever Naruto was in the room. Sasuke didn't know about Hashirama Senju. He didn't know about the transmigration of souls. He only knew that when he looked at Naruto Uzumaki, his instincts screamed at him that this was the mountain he had to conquer if he ever wanted to face Itachi. The classroom door slid open, and Irika Yumino walked in, carrying a clipboard. The room instantly fell silent. Quiet down, everyone. Irika smiled, his eyes sweeping over the class with immense pride. Today, you are no longer students. You are genin of Konohagakure. You have passed your exams, and you will now be stepping into the true shinobi world. Irika's eyes briefly met Naruto's. Irika offered a warm, subtle nod. Despite the abysmal performance on the standard clone jutsu, the third Hokage had personally intervened, reviewing Naruto's overwhelming scores in every other category and granting him a pass. I will now announce the 3-man squads, Irika continued. You will operate under the command of a Jounin instructor. These teams have been carefully balanced to ensure maximum operational efficiency. Sasuke closed his eyes. It doesn't matter who I'm placed with. They will just slow me down. Team 7, Irika called out. Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno. Sakura, sitting a few rows away, instantly slumped over her desk, letting out a dramatic groan. Why am I stuck with the brawler? She muttered. She didn't hate Naruto. He wasn't the obnoxious prankster he was rumored to be, but he was aloof, completely ignoring her attempts to socialize, and spent all his free time meditating or doing one-armed push-ups. And Irika paused, looking down at his clipboard. Sasuke Uchiha? Sakura instantly bolted upright, her hands thrown in the air. Yes. Take that, Ino. Love conquers all. Sasuke didn't flinch at Sakura's outburst. His dark eyes instantly shot toward Naruto. Naruto had turned his head slightly, looking back over his shoulder. The two boys locked eyes across the classroom. The air between them seemed to suddenly thicken. There was no hatred in Naruto's bright blue eyes, but there was a quiet, unyielding challenge. A deeply ingrained confidence that met Sasuke's intense glare without an ounce of submission. Sasuke's lips curled into a faint, predatory smirk. Good, Sasuke thought. If I am forced into a team, at least I am paired with the only person in this room worth testing myself against. Naruto turned back around, a small smile playing on his lips. Yamato had warned him this might happen. The village elders loved their poetry. The Ninetales and the Sharingan, the Senju and the Uchiha, though no one else knew the latter part. It was destiny asserting itself. Later that afternoon, classroom 301, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, orange shadows across the empty classroom. Every other team had been picked up by their Jounin instructors hours ago. Team 7 was alone. Sakura paced furiously at the front of the room, her pink hair practically vibrating with indignation. This is completely unacceptable. How can a Jounin be 3 hours late on the very first day? Sasuke sat in his usual spot, his eyes closed, remaining perfectly still. He was conserving energy. If their sensei was this late, it was either a test of patience or the man was an idiot. Sasuke assumed the former. Naruto stood near the sliding classroom door. He wasn't pacing, nor was he resting. He was inspecting the wooden frame of the door with an intense, calculated gaze. What are you doing, Naruto? Sakura asked, pausing her pacing to look at him skeptically. Are you going to set up one of those stupid eraser pranks? An eraser won't test a Jounin, Naruto replied casually, his voice lacking the shrill, obnoxious tone Sakura expected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, dried acorn. He wedged it carefully into the upper hinge of the sliding door. With his back turned to his teammates, Naruto discreetly bit his thumb, smearing a tiny drop of blood onto the acorn, and channeled a microscopic fraction of his Mokuton chakra into the seed. What is an acorn going to do? Sakura scoffed. You'll see, Naruto said softly, stepping back and leaning against the front desk, crossing his arms. 10 minutes later, the sound of slow, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Sakura gasped, quickly fixing her hair and standing at attention. Sasuke opened his eyes, his Sharingan-less gaze locking onto the door. A pale hand reached out and gripped the edge of the sliding door. Slide. The moment the door opened halfway, the acorn in the hinge reacted to the sudden shift in pressure and the lingering chakra. With a sound like a cracking whip, the seed detonated. A thick, thorny vine, robust as a python, lashed out from the hinge with blinding speed, snapping directly toward the throat of the man entering the room. Sakura shrieked in terror. The man, a tall shinobi with gravity-defying silver hair, a mask covering the lower half of his face, and his hataite pulled low over his left eye, didn't even blink. Poof! The vine slammed not into flesh, but into a solid block of wood. A substitution jutsu, executed so flawlessly and silently that neither Sasuke nor Sakura had seen him form the hand signs. The silver-haired Jounin was suddenly standing behind Naruto, a bored expression in his single visible dark eye. He was holding a small orange book in one hand. Kakashi Hatake mused, his eye curving into a lazy smile. A localized botanical snare trap. Highly unorthodox. No hand seals. It seems the rumors of your unique hobbies are true, Naruto. Naruto didn't jump. He simply turned his head, looking at Kakashi with a bright, entirely unrepentant grin. Just wanted to see if you were awake, sensei. 3 hours is a long time to wait. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. A botanical trap? I didn't see him lay any explosive tags. How did he manipulate a seed? Kakashi snapped his book shut, sliding it into his pouch. He looked at the three genin, his gaze lingering on Naruto for a fraction of a second longer than the others. He remembered the terrified 7-year-old in the alleyway. The boy standing before him now was a completely different creature. The roots had indeed grown deep. My first impression of this group, Kakashi sighed dramatically, scratching the back of his head. You're a bunch of highly dangerous, antisocial brats. I hate you already. Meet me on the roof in 5 minutes. With a swirl of leaves, Kakashi vanished. The roof of the academy. The cool evening wind ruffled Naruto's blonde hair as he sat on the steps opposite Kakashi. Sasuke sat to his right, radiating a quiet, brooding intensity, while Sakura sat on his left, nervously playing with her fingers. Let's start with introductions, Kakashi drawled, leaning against the railing. Likes, dislikes, dreams for the future, hobbies. That sort of thing. Why don't you go first, sensei? Sakura suggested politely. So we know how it's done. Me? I'm Kakashi Hatake. Things I like and things I hate. I don't feel like telling you that. My dreams for the future, never really thought about it. As for my hobbies. I have lots of hobbies, Sakura deadpanned. That told us absolutely nothing except his name. You the pink one? Go, Kakashi pointed. Sakura went through her introduction, her eyes constantly darting towards Sasuke, making it entirely obvious that her likes, hobbies, and dreams revolved entirely around the brooding Uchiha boy. Kakashi sighed internally. Girls her age are more interested in boys than ninja training. Standard. Next. The emo one. Sasuke leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands steepled over his mouth. His voice was cold, carrying a weight far too heavy for a 12-year-old. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I hate a lot of things, and I don't particularly like anything. What I have is not a dream, because I will make it a reality. I'm going to restore my clan, and kill a certain someone. The temperature on the roof seemed to drop several degrees. Sakura looked terrified. Kakashi's eye narrowed slightly. Just as I thought. Consumed by revenge. All right, Kakashi turned his gaze to the final member. And you, Blondie? Naruto didn't try to look edgy, nor did he look overly enthusiastic. He sat up straight, placing his hands firmly on his knees. His bright blue eyes met Kakashi's dark gray one with startling clarity. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Naruto said, his voice steady and resonant. I like ramen, gardening, and training with my older brother Yamato. I dislike the 3 minutes it takes for ramen to cook, and people who judge others before they know them. He paused, a faint, nostalgic smile touching his lips, a smile that looked eerily out of place on a 12-year-old's face. My dream for the future is to become Hokage. But not just a strong ninja who fights wars. I want to build a village where no one ever has to hide who they are. A place where children don't have to be afraid of the dark. And I want to master the legacy my family left behind. Kakashi remained perfectly still. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The boy's words were simple, but the conviction behind them was staggering. It wasn't the hollow boast of a child wanting attention. It was a sacred vow. He really is him, Kakashi thought, a shiver running down his spine. Minato's son, possessing Hashirama's soul. Lord Third wasn't exaggerating. Well, Kakashi clapped his hands together, breaking the tension. That's quite the variety. We have a fangirl, an avenger, and an aspiring architect of peace. Tomorrow, we begin our true duties as shinobi. What kind of duties? Sakura asked. A survival exercise, Kakashi replied, his tone turning dangerously serious. Of the 27 graduates, only 9 will actually become genin. The rest will be sent back to the academy. It's a test with a 66% failure rate, Sakura gasped. Sasuke's eyes narrowed into slits. Naruto simply tightened his grip on his knees. Meet me at Training Ground 3 tomorrow at 5 a.m., Kakashi ordered. And bring your ninja gear. Oh, and one more thing. Kakashi paused, leaning in slightly. Don't eat breakfast. You'll throw up. With that, the jounin vanished. Sasuke stood up immediately. He didn't look at Sakura. He looked down at Naruto. Don't get in my way tomorrow, Uzumaki. If you hold me back, I won't forgive you. Naruto stood up, meeting Sasuke's gaze squarely. He towered over the Uchiha by nearly 2 inches. I don't plan on holding anyone back, Sasuke. Just make sure you can keep up, Sasuke scoffed, turning on his heel and walking away. The rivalry had begun. Training Ground 3 to 10 a.m. The morning sun beat down on the grassy clearing of Training Ground 3. The 3 genin had been waiting for 5 hours. Sakura's stomach was growling audibly, her face pale from hunger. Sasuke leaned against the wooden post, his arms crossed, silently radiating irritation. Naruto, however, was sitting cross-legged on the grass, his eyes closed. He wasn't hungry. Before he left the safe house, he had meditated, drawing in a minute amount of natural energy from the earth beneath the compound, sustaining his physical body. Yamato had taught him that a Mokuton user never truly starved as long as they had access to the living earth. Yo, Kakashi's voice rang out as he strolled casually out of the tree line. Sorry I'm late. A black cat crossed my path, so I had to take the long way. Liar! Sakura screamed, pointing an accusing finger. Kakashi ignored her, walking up to the 3 wooden stumps in the center of the clearing. He reached into his pouch and pulled out 2 small, silver bells attached to red strings. They jingled softly in the quiet morning air. The rules are simple, Kakashi said, tying the bells to his belt loop. You have until noon to take these bells from me. If you don't get a bell, you go without lunch. You'll be tied to these posts, and you'll watch me eat my bento in front of you. Sakura's stomach let out a pathetic whine. Wait a minute, Sasuke spoke up, his sharp eyes locked on Kakashi's waist. There are 3 of us. Why are there only 2 bells? Kakashi's eye curved into a cruel smile. Because at least one of you will definitely end up tied to a post, and subsequently sent back to the academy. It could be one of you. It could be all 3. You can use any weapons or jutsu at your disposal. If you don't come at me with the intent to kill, you won't get them. But sensei, those weapons are dangerous. Sakura protested. Especially for someone who couldn't even dodge an acorn, Naruto muttered, opening his eyes and standing up, cracking his knuckles. Kakashi chuckled. Well, let's see if you can back up that attitude, Naruto. Ready? Start. In the blink of an eye, Kakashi vanished. Sasuke and Sakura instantly reacted to their academy training. They scrambled into the dense tree line, hiding their presence, suppressing their chakra, and waiting for an opening. A basic tenet of the shinobi arts. Remain hidden until the enemy reveals their weak point. Naruto did not run. He stood perfectly still in the center of the clearing, the wind rustling his orange jacket. He slowly turned his head, his eyes scanning the empty grass. He didn't need to see Kakashi. He could feel him. The ground beneath Naruto's feet was alive, and everything that touched it sent microscopic vibrations through the earth. Vibrations that Naruto's Mokuton affinity picked up like sonar. I know you're still here, sensei, Naruto called out calmly, turning to face a seemingly empty patch of grass near the riverbank. You're reading your book. A moment later, the genjutsu dropped. Kakashi was standing exactly where Naruto was looking, leaning against a tree, his orange Ika Paradise book open in his hand. His visible eye widened slightly in genuine surprise. He saw through a high-level illusion without even flaring his chakra? No. He didn't see through it. He sensed my physical location. Fascinating. You know, compared to your teammates, you're a bit weird, Kakashi observed, turning a page. You're supposed to hide. If I hide, I can't hit you, Naruto replied. He reached behind his back, slipping his fingers into his weapon's pouch, wrapping his hand around the hilt of a heavy trench knife Yamato had gifted him. And I really want a bell. Naruto vanished. It wasn't a body flicker jutsu, but a burst of pure, terrifying physical speed. In less than a second, Naruto crossed the 40 feet separating them. Kakashi's eye widened. Fast. Naruto launched a devastating right hook, aiming directly for Kakashi's chest. Kakashi dropped his book, bringing his left forearm up to block the strike. Crack. The impact sounded like 2 boulders colliding. Kakashi felt a shockwave reverberate up his arm, his bones rattling violently. The sheer, overwhelming density of the boy's physical strength was staggering. Kakashi was physically pushed back, his sandals carving deep trenches in the dirt as he skidded to a halt. What kind of monstrous strength is this? Kakashi muttered, shaking his numb arm. Naruto didn't give him time to recover. He pressed the assault, launching into a relentless, suffocating barrage of taijutsu. This was the senju style Yamato had drilled into him. It wasn't about acrobatics or flashy kicks. It was about grounding oneself to the earth, using the hips and the incredible vitality of their bloodline to deliver crushing, unstoppable blows. Kakashi found himself forced entirely on the defensive, his hands moving in a blur to parry and redirect Naruto's strikes. Every time he blocked a punch, it felt like he was being hit by a battering ram. I can't take him lightly, Kakashi realized, his demeanor shifting entirely. He dropped low, sweeping his leg out to trip Naruto. Naruto leaped over the sweep, drawing his trench knife in midair and bringing it down in a vicious arc toward Kakashi's shoulder. Kakashi grabbed Naruto's wrist, twisting his body to throw the boy over his shoulder. But as Naruto flew through the air, he didn't panic. He twisted his body, planting his feet firmly against the trunk of a nearby tree. With a massive flex of his legs, the bark shattered beneath his sandals, and he launched himself back at Kakashi like a missile. Suddenly, a blur of motion erupted from the canopy above. Sasuke Uchiha descended, a barrage of shuriken flying from his fingertips, pinning Kakashi's escape routes to the ground. Kakashi's eye darted upward. The Uchiha joins the fray. Sasuke landed gracefully beside Naruto. He didn't look at the blonde, but he spoke rapidly. He's too fast for one person. His left side is slightly slower because you numbed his arm. You take the right, I'll take the left. Naruto grinned, a fierce, battle-hungry expression lighting up his face. Got it. Let's get those bells, Sasuke. Kakashi watched the two boys stand side by side. The black-haired Uchiha, brimming with cold precision and lethal intent. The blonde-haired senju reincarnate, overflowing with unstoppable vitality and power. For a brief, haunting moment, Kakashi didn't see two 12-year-old genin. He saw the statues at the Valley of the End. Madara and Hashirama, fighting together. Lord Third wasn't kidding, Kakashi thought, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. These two, if they actually work together, they might kill me. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Sasuke roared, his hands moving through the seals with blinding speed. He exhaled a massive sphere of roaring flames that scorched the grass, hurtling directly toward Kakashi. Kakashi didn't dodge. He slammed his hands onto the ground. Earth style, mud wall. A thick wall of earth erupted from the ground, absorbing the fiery blast. Steam hissed into the air, obscuring the battlefield. Kakashi prepared to counterattack, but suddenly, he felt a massive disturbance beneath his feet. He's in the earth. Naruto's voice echoed through the steam. Before Kakashi could emerge, the ground beneath him violently shifted. Naruto had slammed both hands onto the dirt, channeling his chakra directly into the soil. Earth style, tearing earth turning palm. It wasn't Mokutan, but a high-level earth jutsu Yamato had taught him to manipulate terrain. The ground beneath the mud wall splintered and caved in, forcing Kakashi to leap out into the open air to avoid being crushed. Now Sasuke! Naruto yelled. Sasuke was already in the air above Kakashi, a kunai drawn, his eyes wide and tracking Kakashi's movements with terrifying accuracy. He slashed downward, aiming not for flesh, but for the red strings holding the bells. Kakashi twisted his body midair, barely avoiding the blade. He grabbed Sasuke's ankle and hurled him toward the ground. But Naruto was there, catching Sasuke effortlessly by the back of his jacket, absorbing the momentum, and throwing the Uchiha back into the fray without skipping a beat. They were synchronizing. They had never fought together before, but the genetic, ancestral memory buried within their souls seemed to guide their movements. They were the perfect dichotomy. Sasuke was the scalpel, sharp, precise, lethal. Naruto was the hammer, unbreakable, overwhelming, a force of nature. Kakashi landed on his feet, breathing heavily. His flak jacket was scorched, and his forearm was bruised. He looked at the alarm clock sitting on the wooden stump. 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes left, Kakashi thought. If I keep holding back, they are actually going to get a bell. I need to break their formation. Time to see what the boy can really do. Kakashi reached up and slowly gripped the edge of his headband. He pulled it up, revealing his left eye. A blood-red iris, spinning with 3 black tomo. The Sharingan, Sasuke gasped, his eyes widening in shock. A Sharingan? But how? You're not an Uchiha. That is a story for another time, Kakashi said coldly, the air around him suddenly crackling with dense, bluish-white chakra. You too have impressed me. But playtime is over. Kakashi's hand formed a series of rapid seals. Ox, rabbit, monkey, Naruto felt the air pressure drop. His instincts, honed by the soul of the first Hokage, screamed at him. Danger! Lethal danger! Sasuke, get back! Naruto yelled, stepping in front of the Uchiha, his hands coming together in a loud, echoing clap. Kakashi's right hand was suddenly enveloped in a violent, screeching mass of lightning chakra. The sound was deafening, like 1,000 birds screaming at once. It was his signature, original jutsu. The Chidori. Kakashi didn't intend to hit them. He intended to charge past them, terrifying them into submission, and snatch them up before the time ran out. He sprinted forward, the lightning tearing a trench in the earth behind him. But Naruto didn't flinch. He didn't run. He didn't hide. Naruto's blue eyes hardened into diamonds. He didn't care about hiding his power anymore. Yamato had said to only use it in a matter of life and death. The screeching lightning charging at him definitely qualified. Naruto's hands locked into the snake seal. Kakashi's Sharingan spun wildly, instantly analyzing the chakra building within the blonde boy. Wait. That's not earth or water. That chakra density, it's impossible. Mokuton, Daijirin no Jutsu. Would release, great forest technique. Naruto thrust his right arm forward. The skin on his forearm peeled back, instantly replaced by dark, solid timber. With an explosive, terrifying crack, a massive barrage of wooden spikes violently erupted from Naruto's arm. They shot forward like a volley of spears, rapidly expanding and branching out into a dense, lethal thicket of heavily armored wood, hurtling directly toward Kakashi. Sasuke, standing behind Naruto, fell to his knees, his jaw dropping in absolute, paralyzing shock. Wood? He's making wood from his body. Kakashi's eye widened to the size of a saucer. The sheer volume of the wood, the speed of its growth, it was identical to the records of the first Hokage. It was inescapable. It was going to impale him. With a roar, Kakashi thrust his Chidori forward, meeting the vanguard of the great forest technique head-on. The collision was apocalyptic. Lightning shrieked as it tore into the dense timber. Wood splinters the size of swords exploded into the air. Kakashi poured every ounce of his chakra into his hand, his Sharingan tracking the fastest path through the crushing branches. He cut through layer after layer of Hashirama's legacy, the wood desperately trying to bind and crush his arm. He's 12 years old. Kakashi's mind screamed as he fought for his life against the jutsu. How does he have this much power? With a final, desperate surge of lightning, Kakashi shattered the last wooden pillar. He burst through the thicket, his hand stopping a mere millimeter from Naruto's face. The screeching of the birds died down. The deafening crack of the wood ceased. Silence fell over the training ground, save for the heavy, ragged breathing of the two combatants. Kakashi stood frozen, his hands still crackling with residual electricity, hovering directly between Naruto's eyes. Behind him, a massive, 20-foot-long tunnel of shattered, smoking timber scarred the clearing. Naruto hadn't flinched. He stood perfectly still, his eyes locked onto Kakashi's Sharingan. His right arm was still made of jagged wood, slowly retracting back into human flesh. Ring! 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 The alarm clock on the stump went off. It was noon. Kakashi slowly lowered his hand, his legs trembling slightly from the sheer exertion of breaking through the Mokuton. He pulled his headband back down, covering his Sharingan, and let out a long, heavy sigh. He looked at Naruto. Then he looked at Sasuke, who was staring at Naruto as if the boy had just grown a second head. Finally, Kakashi looked up into the trees, where Sakura was peeking out, hyperventilating from the display of god-tier power she had just witnessed. Well, Kakashi said, his voice unusually quiet. Time is up. The aftermath. Sakura was tied to the wooden post. She hadn't engaged Kakashi once, too paralyzed by fear. Sasuke and Naruto sat on the ground in front of her, the two bento boxes resting on their laps. Sasuke hadn't said a word since the jutsu. He just kept stealing sideways glances at Naruto, his mind spinning furiously. The first Hokage's power. The ultimate Kekkei Genkai. It was inside the dead last idiot. You guys eat, Kakashi said, leaning against the memorial stone. Sakura gets nothing. If you feed her, you fail. With that, Kakashi vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruto looked down at his rice. His stomach gave a small rumble. He looked up at Sakura, who was trying very hard not to cry. Naruto sighed. He picked up his chopsticks, grabbed a large piece of tamagoyaki, and held it up to Sakura's mouth. Naruto, what are you doing? Sakura hissed, her eyes darting around. He'll fail you. I don't care, Naruto said, his expression serious. We didn't get the bells because we ran out of time. But when Sasuke and I fought together, we almost had him. If you starve, you'll be useless this afternoon. Eat it. Sasuke remained silent for a moment. Then, he picked up his own chopsticks and held out a piece of fish. The loser is right. We need to be at full strength. I'm not carrying dead weight. Sakura's eyes watered. She leaned forward, taking the food. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A massive cloud of smoke erupted in front of them, and Kakashi reappeared, his face contorted into a terrifying scowl. The air pressure plummeted. You broke the rules! Kakashi roared, raising his hands as if to summon a storm. Any last words? Naruto stood up, stepping in front of his teammates, his fists clenched, his chakra flaring. Yeah! We're a team! If you fail one of us, you fail all of us. We fight together, or we don't fight at all. Kakashi stared down at the fierce blonde boy. He looked at Sasuke, who had drawn a kunai, ready to defend his teammate. He looked at Sakura, who looked terrified but was nodding in agreement. The terrifying scowl vanished. Kakashi's eye curved into a bright, genuine smile. The dark clouds parted, letting the sunlight back into the clearing. You pass, Kakashi said cheerfully. Naruto blinked, his chakra fizzling out. Huh! You pass, Kakashi repeated, pointing a thumb at his chest. In the ninja world, those who break the rules are scum. That's true. But those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. Kakashi looked at the three of them, a profound sense of pride swelling in his chest. Obito. Rin. Minato. Their legacy was right here, standing in front of him. The previous teams only did what I told them to. They had no teamwork. You three, you showed me something different. Kakashi turned, looking up at the sky. Team 7 starts its first mission tomorrow. Dismissed. As Kakashi walked away, he couldn't help but smile. He had the last loyal Uchiha, a girl with perfect chakra control, and the reincarnation of the god of shinobi. Lord Third, Kakashi thought, a quiet laugh escaping his lips. Heaven help the poor bastards who get in our way.